Urban Shadows is a tabletop RPG about characters in a city filled with supernatural creatures and magic who are constantly vying for power. In Urban Shadows, vampires, werewolves, fairies, wizards, and monster hunters are all lurking beneath the shadows, fighting over territory and getting into tense conflicts, while most mortals remain none the wiser. In this video, we'll go over the basics you need to know to jump into a game of Urban Shadows. The world of Urban Shadows focuses on cities and the people who live there, which is why how people connect to one another is very important to the game. In this city, all those who are involved in the supernatural underbelly of urban life relate to each other through circles and factions. Factions are specific groups, like a gang or cult or werewolf pack, that operate within the city and have their own goals and agenda to pursue. Circles are sort of like communities or cultures. Unlike factions, which are specific groups, circles are more broad communities that are united under shared understandings and life experiences. The circles in Urban Shadows are Wild, which are beings from other worlds who have come to this one; Night, monsters who used to be human but have transformed into something else entirely; Mortalis, humans who do not have supernatural powers but who are involved in the supernatural ongoings of the city; and Power, humans who have found ways to enhance their abilities through magic or by serving those who have power. These circles and factions are always changing alliances and holding grudges, making the city a place where everyone is tied to the politics of these groups, whether they like it or not. Players will play characters who are involved in the conflicts within the city, getting themselves involved in turf wars and supernatural mysteries while also dealing with their own personal baggage. Players get to make a character who lives in this city by picking from a wide variety of archetypes that represent who your character is in the narrative, getting to take on the role of both the creatures and mortals who lurk in the shadows. Archetypes can range from the cold and calculating vampire or the remorseful and spooky specter, to a skilled monster hunter or a wizard with arcane powers. Each of these characters will have their own abilities and mechanics unique to their chosen archetype, as well as a set of stats that represents their traits and how well they approach certain challenges. These stats are Blood, representing physicality and toughness; Heart, representing charm and charisma; Mind, representing critical thinking and perceptiveness; and Spirit, representing both your connection to the supernatural as well as your focus when under pressure. Each stat has a number tied to it that tells you how good or bad your character will be at doing something relating to it. Now let's get into actually playing Urban Shadows. Players describe what their character does in the story, and one character, acting as the Master of Ceremonies, also known as the MC, reacts to what the characters do by saying how it impacts the story and other characters. This conversation between the players and the MC is what keeps the story going. The conversation isn't just what you and your friends make up though. Sometimes characters will do something that will trigger something called a move. Moves are small procedures that move the story forward in unexpected and interesting ways. Every player has access to basic moves, such as turn to violence or persuade an NPC, as well as moves that are unique to their character, like the Aware's I Know a Guy, or the Oracle's Soothsayer. You don't just choose a move to use whenever you want, though. Instead, moves are activated or triggered whenever your character does something that would trigger the move. This divides moves into two parts: the trigger, which determines when you need to use the roll, and the effect, which tells you what you need to roll and what happens depending on what you roll. When you're playing the game, you need to describe what your character does, and if what they do fits a move's description, then you go to that move and follow its instructions to see what happens. For example, the move Mislead, Distract, or Trick is triggered when you try to mislead, distract, or trick someone. So if your character tries to lie to someone by faking their identity to get into a forbidden area, this would trigger that move. After you trigger a move, you follow the instructions on that move. Usually, you will have to roll 2 six-sided dice or 2d6 to see what happens. These moves are modified by adding or subtracting the modifier of one of your stats on your archetype, or one of the ratings with one of the circles in the game. Roll with Blood would mean that you roll 2d6 and add your blood rating, whereas rolling a circle move, where the MC tells you to roll with Wild, would mean that you roll your wild rating, which represents your connection to that circle. After adding up the dice and modifiers, it's time to see what happens. Moves typically have 3 outcomes based on the numbers you rolled. On a 6 or below, you miss, and something bad happens. On a 7 to 9, you have a weak hit, where you succeed, but either something bad happens or you don't get exactly what you want. On a 10 or higher, you have a strong hit, where you get what you want and more. Every move in the game works differently, but you mostly need to know that a 7+ will always be a hit, meaning your character gets what they want, and a 6 and below will always be a miss, meaning an unwanted consequence happens. Each move has different outcomes, so make sure to pay attention when you're making your rolls and reading moves. Moves propel the narrative forward in exciting and unexpected ways, which is why they're so important in Urban Shadows. There are also more types of moves, such as circle moves, which involve the greater politics of the city, and intimacy moves, which are unique to each archetype and are triggered whenever a character shares a moment of tender vulnerability with another character. Moves can also be impacted by the terms forward and ongoing. Forward just means that you add a bonus to the next relevant roll your character makes, and ongoing means you keep adding a bonus to all relevant rolls during that scene. Some moves also tell you to hold. This just means that you gain a few points that you can spend to do certain things. For example, the wizard's channel move allows them to hold 3, which means they get 3 points that they can spend on casting their spells. Besides moves, the other most important aspects of Urban Shadows is debt. In a world where mages can summon demons and where specters can manifest in and out of banks to grab money, cash and currency don't hold as much weight as it does for mortals. If you're a powerful being with great insight into the dark reality of the world, money doesn't mean much to you. This is where debt comes in. In the city, debts are what makes the world go round. Think of them like IOUs, or a promise or favors. At any time, you, another character, or NPCs can cash in debts to make someone do something. For example, if you owe a local necromancer a debt, they might call you in the middle of the night and cash in their debt to ask you to go find some corpses for their upcoming ritual. You could say no, of course, but this would trigger the move refuse to honor a debt. Depending on how you roll, you may get away with not following through on your debt, but if you fail, then your reputation in the city will be damaged as people begin to trust you less and less. After all, what good is someone who can't commit to their promises? There are specific moves for gaining and owing debts. When you do someone a favor, the person you're doing a favor for owes you a debt. When someone agrees to overlook a harm you've done to them, you owe them a debt. These are all debt moves that allow players and NPCs to accrue debts during the game. Oftentimes, NPCs will gain debts on players and spend those debts to make the players do stuff. Players will also have debts that they owe each other. Players can use the debt move, cash in a debt, to make a player or NPC do something for them. This is where the game comes together, since players are encouraged to constantly involve each other in each other's schemes by cashing in their debts for extra help and taking on debts for help in the future. For example, if you're unaware, you might want to cash in debts from a wolf or a vamp for some extra protection and muscle during a mission, or maybe a wizard will want to cash in a debt to have the specter help them investigate a haunted apartment. Debts are incredibly useful, so make sure to always be using them to pull each other into the story. The last mechanic we need to cover is corruption. If your character embraces the darkness and falls into their sinister side, they gain corruption, as shown in the archetype's corruption section. Corruption is usually gained through specific moves like Let It Out, whenever the MC thinks is narratively necessary, or whenever your character triggers their corruption trigger, which is different for each archetype. Whenever all of your corruption boxes are filled, you get to choose from several benefits, such as permanent bonuses to your stats or unique corruption moves. These corruption moves are special moves that allow your character to delve into their most dangerous powers, like learning blood magic if you're a vamp, or traveling into someone's dreams if you're a specter. This power comes at a cost, though. If you mark all of your corruption advancement boxes, your character becomes so corrupted by the darkness that they become an enemy. They might retire into the shadows, or they may return later to wreak havoc on the other characters. Either way, too much corruption turns them into the worst versions of themselves, making them a dangerous adversary to the players. And that's pretty much all you need to know to get started playing Urban Shadows. If you want to start playing Urban Shadows, download the free quick start of Urban Shadows over at DriveThruRPG to start your campaign. Link in the description below. Thanks for watching and have a great day.